While we were in Park City, this was my rental bike. It's a 2020 Specialized Enduro Elite in this awesome color. In today's video, I'll review the bike with all the stock components and talk about features too. I'll also tell you how the bike handles on all mountain terrain. I had this bike for 3 days in Utah and I rode 3 places. I rode Deer Valley's downhill park on the first day, which has great tech trails and single track. The challenging terrain helped me get a feel for how this bike handles. I also rode Woodward Park City's downhill park, which doesn't have tech, but has great flow and massive floater jumps. The final location was Trailside, a place where I could get my dose of wood features and test the bike on the climbs too. First, let's start off with the components, then move on to how it handles. Obviously, the frame is the newly designed 2020 Specialized Enduro frame. I'll talk about what the new geometry does later, but it helps a lot. It looks like they went off the design of the new Santa Cruz frames, but I prefer this one. It's full carbon fiber, including the rear triangle. Coming in at just under 9 pounds, it's a nice light frame. The suspension on the Elite gives a RockShox Lyric Select Plus in the front and a Super Deluxe Select Plus in the rear. I personally think Specialized should have given the ultimate versions of the suspension to increase value, but they're very similar to the Select Plus. The RockShox Lyric has 170mm of travel, which is a perfect amount for this build. This fork also has compression adjustment and rebound. Since it isn't the ultimate, the charger damper doesn't have independent settings, but this works perfectly fine. The Super Deluxe in the rear also has 170mm of travel and is the Select Plus just like the fork. This shock has a setting for open and locked with the lever right against the right side. It's this little blue handle. The rebound is sort of tucked away in the frame, but you turn the dial on the top of the shock either way you want. I don't like this format of the shock because adjusting the rebound is a huge pain. However, it does perform well. If you know me, I prefer the Fox DPX2 over the Super Deluxe, and I could notice a difference here. This one doesn't feel as responsive over small bumps and progressivity, but it still does work. The group set on this bike is a mix of NX and GX Eagle. The shift levers and chain are NX, and the derailleur and cassette are GX. It's smart that they put the GX cassette on the bike, as it has stronger materials over the NX. The bike's GX pulley has the extra metal cage on the back, making it sufficiently stronger than the NX pulley. The shift levers and chain are basically the same as GX, so there isn't really a difference. The levers on the GX are better material though. I like how the whole group set feels, but it's definitely expensive for the price. The bike costs $5,300, so I feel like a Shimano XT or something higher than GX should be included. At the very least, they should at least make the chain and shift levers GX. For the brakes, the bike comes with SRAM Code Rs, which are their downhill series brakes. These things are powerful, and I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. It's certainly good for their steep downhill fast sections and bike parks too, but I wish you could modulate them a little more. Since they are downhill brakes, the goal is to stop as quickly and as powerfully as possible. They do a great job at what they're meant to do, but I'm not a big fan. I would personally vouch for SRAM Guides, Magura MT7s, or Shimano XTR4 piston brakes. I'm not trying to complain about the brakes, they're just not my thing. The rest of the components are pretty stock, like the specialized alloy bars and the standard grips, but there are 2 great features unique to the Specialized. The first one is the swap box and the stem. On the Enduro, the stem has a small multi-tool inside with a cap that you can flip open. This was way more useful than you might expect, since a crash loosened a lot of parts. I needed to tighten my brake lever and align my handlebars, so this was a quick way to fix it rather than digging through your backpack. The other feature is the removable water bottle cage. Located on the top of the down tube, you can actually remove the bottle cage and store stuff in your down tube. I carried a tire and a tube, and a larger multi-tool as well. This is a great addition to the bike, and is very helpful and easy to use too. Just flip the hinge down and pull it off. The storage is an amazing add-on and should be used by other companies too. Even though it's not the biggest, it's still very helpful, and if you're going on a short ride, you can not even bring a backpack. Now, onto how the bike handles in 4 situations: climbing, technical downhill, stability over bumps of fast sections, and jumping. On the climbs at Trailside Bike Park, the Enduro handled very well. The suspension setup and pivot was very intuitive going up. I didn't feel much suspension activity on the climbs, and it handled very nicely. Also, the Super Deluxe's easy lockout position is really good for a non-remote system. Just reach down and flick the little switch. This whole bike feels very light and easy to pedal on the climbs, and it's sort of relaxing too. I usually don't like to climb, but this bike actually made it quite fun. This is way above average for enduro bikes, and I really enjoyed pedaling it. The steep seat tube angle really makes a difference for sure. Now on to stability. As I said before, I rode this at Deer Valley Bike Park, a place with a lot of fast trails with sections of chattering brake bumps. The trail Tsunami is very fast and flows too, with sections where you feel way too fast. The enduro handled very well on the terrain. Over the brake bumps, I kept traction nicely and didn't feel unstable or like I was sliding out. On the flat, high-speed section of Tsunami, I didn't wobble at all due to the 29-inch wheels. The larger wheels make a huge difference when it comes to being more stable. I love it. Over the braking bumps and potholes, the suspension design makes it feel very smooth too, and I didn't get as much arm pump as I have on many other bikes that I've tried. For the first time, I wasn't bothered by the brake bumps, and usually, that's the only negative thing about bike parks, so I had a blast. Next, let's test the technical ability. This is Fire Swamp, and it's a really technical trail at Deer Valley's downhill park with some drops, steep sections, and ruts. Going into Fire Swamp. It is a black tech trail. Looks flowy at the start, but it gets kind of crazy. I noticed the bike handled great. I felt like I could ride fast and stay confident and stable at the same time. I have ridden lots of other enduro bikes, and I have to say this is definitely above average for sure. I also noticed the high bottom bracket height. This gave me great clearance over some of the steeper rolls and made the bike more stable in steep and rough conditions. Lower Fire Swamp. I love this trail. It's like there's a bunch of those drops and they all have really nice and like great run-ins and run-outs. Usually, I mean it is a tech trail, so you can't expect so much. The 800mm handlebars also help make me more stable and comfortable on the tech. If there was one thing the bike lacks in this category, it would be the ability to throw the back end around and whip it easily. This makes a bigger difference when jumping, but I noticed it on tech too. The final category is jumping and freeride. I definitely got my fair share of testing this at Deer Valley. Trailside Bike Park with cool wooden features and jumps. And at Woodward, where I hit some of the biggest jumps in my life and crashed on the 43-foot table. I got my fair share of jumping the Specialized Enduro, so I have a great feeling for how it handles. I think this bike is pretty much average for an enduro bike. It's not as ground huggy as a bike like the YT Capra, but it's not quite as boosty as something like the Transition Patrol or Norco Range. As I said earlier, the longer chainstay length makes the bike a little less flickable in the air. I could still do some nice tables and small little whips, but it was noticeably harder than it would be on my personal bike with chainstays of 430mm. On the size medium that I rented, the bike did feel awesome on straight jumps, and especially landings. The design of the suspension very low down makes the bike feel like it has more travel than it actually does. I took numerous hard landings on my trip, and the bike took it very, very well. The range of adjustment also allows you to dial the bike in easily. Going up lips, the bike feels okay. It doesn't pop super high, but it can get over the jumps easily without struggling to clear them. You just have to work a little bit harder. For my scores, I'll base it off of 5 being average for the bike category, 1 being the worst possible, and 10 being the best. For climbing, I give this an 8 out of 10. It's a great climber on technical steep climbs and long fire roads too. The suspension design and pivot is great for climbing hills. For stability, I give it a 7.5. The Specialized Enduro is a very stable bike. The longer geometry and 29-inch wheels make the bike very stable on most terrain. I just want a bit burlier tires than the standard. For technical downhill, the bike earns an 8. It's a near perfect descender on easier, faster tech, and the same goes with steep, rocky, and loose sections. I really like the way the Enduro feels over gnar, and it gives a fun ride too. I feel addicted to tech on this bike, and it's super awesome. The final category, jumping, puts the score at a 5. This may seem very low, but that is dead average for an Enduro bike at this price point. It doesn't seem that playful, but feels super smooth and controllable when you jump it right. I'm not going with the method of average scores because it does a lot of different things at different levels. I think the Specialized Enduro is the bike for someone who loves enduro racing, where climbing and technical descending both play a factor. If you want to throw a bit of jumping into your riding, this bike would still be okay. If you're looking to only jump, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's still a great bike. It's definitely unique to certain types of riders, that's for sure. Racers who like to incorporate some jumps into their riding is definitely the ideal category. I had a great time riding this bike, and I hope you enjoyed the review. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next week.